Our next lesson is called Graphing Linear Equations Using the Slope and Y-Intercept. So let's start with our first main idea, which is slope. Slope is written as a ratio, so this is review, of the vertical change, which would be the rise, to the horizontal change, which would be the run, between any 2 points on a line. This remains the same for any 2 points on the same line. The variable used for slope is m. Our next big idea is y-intercept. The y-intercept is the y value of the coordinate where the line intersects the y-axis. In this picture, the y-intercept is 1. You can see that over here. That's where it's crossing the y-axis, which means the coordinate would be 0, 1. And the variable used for the y-intercept is the letter b. Which brings us to what we've learned recently, which is slope-intercept form and what each piece stands for. So slope-intercept form. Linear equations are frequently written in slope-intercept form, and that is y equals mx plus b, where m is the slope and b is the y-intercept. So just a quick review of identifying the slope and the y-intercept in each equation. My first equation is y equals negative 3x minus 5. The slope should always be located in front of the x, so my slope is negative 3. And then my y-intercept is the number at the end, or the number not attached to x, which in our case here would be negative 5. Make sure you take the signs with it. In b, y equals 10 plus 1/2 x. So for this one, we're going to put a little star and write order. And then we're going to write be careful. We don't want to get in a habit of thinking the slope is always first and the y-intercept is always second. The slope is always the coefficient or the number in front of x. So that's actually over here. Our x is written second this time. So our slope is 1/2. And our y-intercept is 10. So now we're going to use all of that information that we've learned over the last few lessons to graph linear equations by using the slope and the y-intercept. So it says use the steps below to graph an equation using slope-intercept form. First, you're going to write the equation in slope-intercept form. So remember that slope-intercept form means y equals mx plus b. If it's not in that form, we are going to have to make it be in that form as we've learned previously. The first point you're going to plot is always the y-intercept. And remember, if you're on the y-axis, your x value is always a 0. Then you will use the slope of the line to create more points, remembering that slope is rise over run. And lastly, you use a ruler to draw a line that extends through the points, placing an arrow on both ends. So we'll run through these steps with our first example. Graph the equation y equals 2/3 x plus 1. Name the slope and y-intercept. So I look at the form and I see it is in y equals mx plus b or slope-intercept form. So step 1 is done. Step 2, I'm going to graph the y-intercept. Step 3, I'm going to use the slope. So the first thing we want to do is actually record what the slope is. So my slope is the number in front of x, that's 2/3. We also want to record the y-intercept, which is the number without a variable, which is a 1. So if I think about what these mean, slope is rise over run. So rise is either going to be an up or a down number. Since my 2 on top is positive, I'm going to go up. The number on the bottom is a run. So that's a horizontal change, which means left or right. Since it's positive, we're going to go to the right. And my y-intercept is on the y-axis. So if my y-intercept is 1, that means the first point I'm going to plot is 0, 1. So I will plot 0, 1, and then I will use my slope to count out the rest of my points. So I'm going to go up 2 to the right 3 and place a point. Up 2 to the right 3 and place a point. Then all I have to do is take my ruler, connect the points, draw arrows on the end to show that there are infinitely many solutions on a line, and then label it with the equation. Y equals 2/3 x plus 1. Now let's move on to example 2. It says graph the equation y equals -3/4 x. Name the slope and y-intercept. So if you remember back to our steps, step number 1, you need to make sure the equation's in slope-intercept form. Our equation actually is in slope-intercept form. Y equals -3/4 x, and then if there's nothing on the end, that's the same as plus 0, which means my slope is the coefficient of x, which is -3/4. You can put the negative with the 3 or the 4. So I'm choosing to put it with the -3. So that would be down 3 because the top number is a rise, so that's an up or down. The bottom number is a positive 4, which is a right or left. Since it's positive, we're going to go to the right. If I wanted to write it as 3 over -4, you would be going up 3 into the left 4, and I'll show you how that looks on the graph. My y-intercept is 0, which means my first point I'm going to plot is 0, 0. So we will put 0, 0 down first, and then we will go down 3 to the right 4. When I can no longer go any more down 3 to the right 4, remember I can do the opposite, which is what this fraction is telling you. I can go up 3 and to the left 4. I would then draw my line using a ruler, arrows on both ends to show there are infinitely many solutions, and then write the equation on the line as my label. So the big thing to remember with this one is you have to put the negative symbol with the numerator or denominator, not both. Because if you do it with both, it'll change the value of your slope. Now in number 3, when I look at step 1, it says graph the equation x plus 3y equals -3, name the slope and y-intercept. I hope you recognize that this is not slope-intercept form. It's not y equals mx plus b. It's in standard form. So at this time, I cannot identify the slope and the y-intercept. So we're going to underline this and make a note of this. This is not in y equals mx plus b form. So that means we have to work on changing it like we did in a previous lesson. So x plus 3y equals -3. I want my y's to be all alone. That's my ultimate goal. So the first thing I always want to do is get rid of my x's. So since that's a positive x, I'm going to subtract x. Whatever I do to one side, I must do to the other side to keep it in balance. So the x's disappear and we get 3y equals -x minus 3. Now you can put the -3 first and then minus x. It's totally up to you. Doesn't matter. I'm just trying to write it in actual mx plus b form. So the next thing I would have to do is divide both sides by 3 because I do not want y with a 3 in front of it. So I'm going to divide every single piece that I see by 3. That will make this y equals -1/3 x minus 1. So my slope is -1/3 because it's the number in front of x. I'm going to choose to put the negative with the top number 1, which would mean I'd be going down and to the right. But remember, if you want to put the negative with the bottom, you would just be going up and left. My y-intercept is -1, which means the first point I'm going to plot is 0, -1. So I'll go over to my graph and plot 0, -1, and then I will count down 1 to the right 3, down 1 to the right 3, or I can count up 1 to the left 3. Whatever you do, you know that this is supposed to make a straight line, arrows on both ends, and then you label with the original equation. So in all of these, I want to point out what we've been doing and what you should do in order to get full credit for receive full credit for graphing this way. If you want to graph this way, you have to write down the slope and y-intercept. Let's underline that and star it. That's very important. So the only work that's required for equations that are already in the correct form is what m equals and what b equals. The down, right, up, left, all of that is for your use. If the equation is not in y equals mx plus b form, then you should also have work of putting it into that form as we did in example 3. Now I'm going to have you try the closing activity. It says Mrs. Hodson said that the graphs of the equations below are incorrect. Find the student's errors and correctly graph the equations. So you can see in graph number 1 and graph number 2, the student work is on the left. Then on the right, there's a place for you to write the error as well as correctly graph the equation. So at this time, I'd like you to pause the video and try the closing activity. And when you're ready to go over the answers, you can resume the video. All right, now that you've had a chance to try the closing activity, let's go over the answers. In number 1, the student went down 1 to the right 2. That would be a slope of negative 1/2, where we had a slope of positive 1/2, so we should have been going up 1 to the right 2. So I made the correction starting at the same y-intercept. I went up 1, right 2. When I ran out of room, I can also go down and left. This should be my correct line. Don't forget your arrows and your labels, as well as showing your work. You must identify M and B in order to get full credit for graphing in this way. When you look at number 2, the error was the y-intercept. The y-intercept is supposed to be at 0, -1. This person started at 0, +1. So we want to correct it by starting at the proper y-intercept and then using the correct slope of down 3 to the right 5. Make sure you have arrows and a label. And that concludes your lesson on graphing linear equations using the slope and y-intercept.